my position and what I'm arguing for is that the notion that this trilogy had no structure and no plan is completely hogwash, and this trilogy actually has stronger themes carried throughout than either of the other two trilogies. Like, what's like what's the strong character themes that carries from, what's the dialectic of the prequels and the original trilogy? There's certainly a dialectic in this trilogy. Where I think it falls apart is JJ doesn't perfectly nail the synthesis in the Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah. I get that. I totally understand what you're saying. I think that there are some connecting themes throughout each of the trilogies, but not in the sense that all of them feel like a coherent piece of art.
It feels like there's a conversation going on between The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi that, doesn't exist between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, or The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. There's these two juxtaposed positions that are kind of duking it out. And I think that The Rise of Skywalker, reaches the conclusion that both are going towards. It's just maybe with it being a JJ film, it's a little too skewed towards one perspective, or maybe the fact that JJ's not good at ending things, it doesn't reach a proper conclusion, but something falls flat about it. But I don't think that it just ruins the trilogy and JJ just decided to bring Palpatine back, as if the books hadn't been pointing to that for the last 4 years.
Right.
Or her being a Palpatine, even though people have been putting that together for a while. I discredit it, but
right. It was an obvious fan theory.
Yeah.
Because you could have any number of characters you could have thought she was related to, and I think that simultaneously strengthens the resolve of the belief in The Last Jedi about Rey's heritage not being relevant.
Exactly.
Because on one hand, it undermines the point that's being made in Last Jedi, which is it doesn't matter who you came from.
Right.
But at the same time, it also presents a situation wherein she is actively undermining her own genealogy and not saying that she is bound by the destiny of her birth.
Right.
But who she is and who she wants to be.
Right. I think it doesn't perfectly nail it, but it finds a way to build on that. And like I've said before, what could be, once Rey has overcome that feeling of, I come from nothing, I have no place in the story, what could be more of a challenge in that direction than to find out, oh no, you have a place, you're just supposed to be the villain. Your place is to be evil. That's your destiny is to the dark side. And I think that it doesn't perfectly nail it, but the theme, I think, builds on that while challenging those of us who got comfortable with The Last Jedi. In the same way that The Last Jedi challenged that thing of she has to be somebody important. You can also fall into that trap of, well, she has to be, just Rey. She just has to be nobody. Otherwise, it's not her story or whatever. And that's why I like her calling herself Skywalker at the end. It's a nice button on the whole saga of this drama between the Skywalkers and the Palpatines, and after the Skywalkers are all gone, the last standing Palpatine rejects her name and takes their name and follows their code and way of life.
Right. Which you could say that that's what all of the Skywalkers did. All of the relevant Skywalkers, or all of the main character Skywalkers. Because Anakin, whenever he turns at the very end, he makes the same flip that Rey essentially does, just in the opposite direction.
Right.
And Yeah, it's like there's a repeating pattern of all of these themes in Star Wars, and I feel like because they're so universal, it's really hard to miss them, and it's really hard to see how people can't appreciate what is actually happening in these, because none of this feels completely just off the wall, out of thin air, or completely.
I think that they definitely had like the full
rest.
thing planned, like knew how they wanted to end, because the beginning of the film was very rushed. They just didn't know how they were gonna fully get there.
Right.
Right.
Which I guess is why people are saying, "Oh, it wasn't planned," because like some things like might not fit perfectly.
No,
but...
I think the thing with the planning is it wasn't micromanaged like Marvel, which is to its benefit in some ways because these films all have their own signature. You know, like you grab a Marvel still or scene, and if you don't have the character or whatever, it is some random scene, you can't tell what movie it's from. They're all
Right.
shot the same. They all look the same.
They all look shitty as fuck, honestly.
Yeah, they all look fucking terrible. And
Infinity War and Endgame less so, but they all have this problem where it's like the director will just they'll have their main camera and they'll establish that shot, and then they'll just have another camera just somewhere, just like wherever the fuck, and then they'll just like flip between those to imply action is happening,
Right.
or to just like have more like stuff in the scene. Whereas like a good director will be like, all right, we have one camera, we're setting up for this. If the director of photography doesn't like this shot, we're going to keep doing it until we get it right.
Right.
And then the movie has a coherent feel, and that's what this movie feels like.
We got
That's
like
what all
quite a
three
bit
of
of
these
Dutch
movies feel
angles
like.
too.
what?
We got like quite a bit of Dutch angles too.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did a lot of stuff like that. There's a pretty good sense of film grammar in these, more so than the other Disney action movies.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that has to do with the direction, obviously. But
I wish there was more purple. Because
That's a good point.
The Force Awakens is very blue, and The Last Jedi is very red. You know, like those are the very dominant colors in those movies, and I wish that's kind of like a subtle thing. There's a lot of blue and greens in this movie, so it's like reinforcing the thesis of The Force Awakens, and subtly introducing some other things in the color. And color is very, very important to Star Wars. I mean, it's important in general, but it's very important in Star Wars.
there's
And
a lot of black and neutral colors in this
Yeah.
one. There's a lot of like darkness and ambiance, and like all the sets are like really, really vast and open seeming.
You know, I thought about the second time watching it, and taking it in a little bit more. People, I'm sure that there's augment to it, but some of it, the scaffolding shit she's running on, had to be real. People built that fucking Death Star set.
Yeah.
You know, like, can you imagine? Like, some of the sets in this movie are just outrageous. From a cinematic point, this movie is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
The sets and the cinematography and the lighting and color design.
You can tell a lot about a movie by the color palette too. Like you could almost deconstruct the entire tone of a movie by the color palette and the lighting.
Someone took the first 6 Star Wars movies and going by release order, and they like decoded like the main like colors in them, and it progressively gets darker and darker until you get to episode 3, where you finally get into red.
Yeah.
You know, it's like just
Whenever I think of like episode 1, it's all tans. It's all yeah. It's all like sandy vistas and stuff like that. It's just like tans, and like I just see like a sea of beige and then Mace Windu's lightsaber.